Hey guys, Keith again with Bulletproof RC. This is my Traxxas 2021 Bronco. You know, this has become one of my favorite rigs relatively quickly. I purchased it just simply because I really like Broncos. But then soon after I realized that Traxxas implemented the original wheelbase they used on the Defender body, but they implemented a lighter, really good looking body onto that same wheelbase, and in the end they have, I believe, achieved the most capable TRX4 to date. And man, it looks good on the trail doing it too. Last video showed you guys where I'd added a low profile 299 Reef servo winch in the front end, and I also put a Reef 444 servo in for steering, and went with a Hobbywing axe system for the power needs there. And just sitting there looking at those Traxxas shift servos, it just didn't feel right. I considered upgrading to a Power HD servo in there for the micro servos, and that didn't seem right to me. You know, you put high-end electronics in a rig and you pair it up with some low-quality electronics, I don't know. It just doesn't rest easy with me, so decided to go a different route. Plus, my buddy sent me pictures of the Reef 99 micro servos mounted up to the DSM mounts, and I realized how easy this was to install. Just no turning back at this point. I've got to go all the way with this rig. I love it, I want it to be right, and I want the electronics to be good. And one thing about a Reef servo, once you buy one, you don't look back, because they don't break, you don't have to replace them, it's the last servo you buy. And considering all the trouble that people have with micro servos out there, why not go with the best? So anyway, I'm going to do a step-by-step video, guys, and show you guys the process of how to install these things in your TRX4, because the Reef servo is a little bit different than the Traxxas servo, which is why DSM Offroad released their mounts to make it easy. So I'm going to pause the video, we'll pull the body, and we'll talk about a little bit more about what's going on here. Okay, got the body off, guys. I wanted to show you guys the differences between the Traxxas servo and the Reef servo. If you notice, the Traxxas servos are mounted with a single screw on either tab. It's also worth mentioning that the Reef servo is quite a bit deeper than the Traxxas servo. But it does have, looks like you could either use a single screw in the tab here, or you could use 4 screws to mount the servo down. The DSM Offroad mounts utilize all 4 screws, so you can definitely rest assured knowing your micro servo is mounted properly. Plus, we're going to be going up quite a bit in torque here. These little Traxxas servos are microscopic torque ratings. That's why you got all the spring-loaded servo horns in here. That's to protect the servos. They're servo savers. Some people think, oh, that's if you don't get endpoints right and such. Well, it is, but the reason for that is you're going to burn these servos up really quick if you didn't have this spring-loaded mechanism in here. Sometimes you shift into 2-speed or your diffs, and it takes a minute to catch up. What I mean by that is I've put it in first or second gear before and pulled the throttle only to hear my gears clicking into place after, while the tires are moving. That's not good on your transmission. It's not good on your diff lockers either. It's because you got these little weak, puny servos in here. Well, problem solved, because at nearly 100 inch-ounces of torque, you're going to get the job done. I've also got the aluminum servo horns from Reef that I'm going to use as well. So I'm going to have a bulletproof mechanism system in here, and should be going into either high or low gear and locking the diffs relatively easy with all that torque. And aren't these pretty? Man, that is nice. This is going to be sick, guys. Another thing I wanted to mention to you guys, that in my previous video I mentioned that I had to reverse this servo horn because I'm using one channel for both of these servos, and I wanted both cables to be pulled at the same time to lock the diff, and then released to release the diff. And the only way to do that was to reverse this servo horn. Well, I thought that was the only way, but DSM Offroad actually reached out to me and messaged me and said, no, all you got to do is pick up a signal inverter. And for under 10 bucks, you got this signal inverter. I'll take it out of the pack and show you in a little close up in a minute, but it just goes in line between your servo and receiver, and it changes the direction of your servo. So when I put the Reef servos in here, I can mount them properly and align everything right, and it's going to be awesome. So let's pause the video. We'll get these Traxxas servos removed, and we'll take it step by step. Okay guys, you do have to release the transmission from the skid plate. It's 5 screws. There's pretty self-explanatory when you get into it and look, but like I said, 5 screws holds us down in order to replace the Traxxas servo mount, which is 2 screws right there. As you can see, the DSM is installed. The original Traxxas one looks like this right here and mounts like that. So yeah, the DSM mount is in there. So I'm going to go ahead and mount the servo to that and get the transmission bolted back down. Alright guys, the shifting servo has been installed. Everything is operating very well. The Reef servo is insanely faster and more powerful than the Traxxas servo, and it definitely looks great in there too. Quick tip though, with the DSM mount, I did notice a little bit of flex going on when the servo would move, even though the endpoints are set correctly. I put a little bit of servo tape under this servo and stuck it down to the chassis, and with it being mounted to the DSM and servo tape down to the chassis, seems to be a little bit better and more secure. Anyway, just a little tip. Now it's time to move on to the Diff lock servos. Little quick side-by-side comparison of the Traxxas versus Reefs Diff lock servos and DSM mount versus the Traxxas mount. As you can see, the servos sit quite a bit lower in the Traxxas mount because of the huge Traxxas servo saver, and the DSM mount will line the servos up for use with a regular horn. Okay guys, got the Diff lock servos installed. Everything bolted right up. The DSM mounts are wonderful to use. Everything worked great. In fact, they are absolutely necessary. You cannot mount a Reef servo into the Traxxas mounts without modification. So I'd highly recommend the DSM mounts, and of course the Reef servos are just performing like champs. I mean, the Traxxas servos, they were so weak. They were very difficult to get to engage and disengage properly, but these servos are just fantastic. All that's left is getting the bird nest of wires all tucked back into this radio box. I did have to use some wire extenders for the Reef servos, or for the one servo over here. But other than that, it's all done. Let's get it all buttoned up and we'll finish this video out. Okay guys, got all the wire management buttoned up, and man, I couldn't be happier with this install. These servos are strong, they're fast, and they're aesthetically pleasing. And special thanks to DSM for manufacturing brackets to make this job easy and recommending the servo reverse module. Wonderful, wonderful install. Really happy with this Bronco now. Definitely a wonderful package having all the Reef servos, the Hobby Wing system. Can't wait to get down the trail. She is looking good. And that'll do it for this video, guys. As always, like and subscribe if the shoe fits, my friends, and have a great day.